Welcome back. I hope you had fun exploring some proxies and some learning signals within your own setting, maybe making a note of some of those. Hopefully you've gone back to the video content and rewatched things and checked in with some of the ways that we described those new concepts. What we're going to do now is going to start to consider solo taxonomy as a lens. So a lens in which we can see and explore new things within our current practice. And Chris, we're going to explore a video. And I think that you shot this video, didn't you?
I did shoot this video, yeah. So what we're going to do is look at a video, and what we're going to ask you to do is to really look at what complexity of learning can you see in the following video. Now, I'm not going to give you any context about this video. I'm not going to tell you what kind of subject area it's in. I'm not going to tell you how old the students are. What I am going to tell you is that what the students were asked to do was to take some information on some bits of paper, and they were given a question, and they had to answer that question using the pieces of information. And I'm going to refer to it shortly as a brains on the table activity. Okay, so we'll get into that in a moment. But what I'd love you to do is just watch this short video for 1 minute and just think about, can you see any levels of complexity in what the students are doing using maybe some of our solo language to help us. So let's get this video going. It's just a minute. Tom and I will just kind of whistle in the background because it's silent. It is definitely sped up. It's about 25 minutes worth of learning, sped up. All right, here we go. So a quick minute's worth of video, just looking at some of those learning. So literally looking at learning proxies. And what we'd love you just to consider for a second, just while Tom and I are going to talk through this a little bit, is to say kind of what proxies did you notice? So whilst we're asking everyone who's participating in the course to think about that, Tom, what did you notice? What kind of things did you see that might be considered proxies for learning in that video?
There's a lot going on, isn't there? And again, I'm reminded about the complexity. So even though we just had a single shot there of a group of 3 students, there's actually quite a lot happening. And throughout the course of that video, you saw a few different things. I was paying a particular attention to the way the group was working. And so that changed. I think there was obviously the student on the left who was kind of almost moving everything. They were in charge of the pieces of paper. And I'm curious to know if that means anything. So there was something about that student maybe feeling a little bit more confident with this or taking charge. So there's something there about maybe their teamwork or collaboration skills. That might have been an unintended outcome that we start to see a proxy of. Obviously, the way that they were organizing the pieces of paper was another. And so I'm curious to know that what those groups were they accurate, whose learning was that? And I think that that's a crucial question here, especially when I'm thinking of seeing group work, it is actually quite a noisy set of signals because it's coming from 3 different minds, 3 different kind of students trying to collectively show what they know. And I wonder if it's all happening at the same speed. So I have lots of questions, but I can certainly see that the group dynamic was as a proxy. So that's showing me something, it's a representation. I think the paper on the table was certainly one. And also I noticed them recording in a book as well. So they're recording and making notes, and that was also another proxy, a representation of what they have learned. Chris, what do you when you look back on that, what do you notice?
So I'm going to give you some context around it in a moment, but actually the thing that I noticed most And I do an awful lot of these brains on the table activities. And brains on the table comes from, as an expression that comes from Professor David Leet at the University of Newcastle upon Tyne in the UK. I was very privileged to be in his class. So he taught me when I was trained to be a teacher. And he does a huge amount of these kind of interactive kinesthetic activities. And linking them to solo taxonomy is a really powerful way to understand them. But the proxy that actually I want you to really concentrate on in a few minutes, because we're actually going to re-watch that video a little bit, is in fact the hand movements of the students. So there's something really fascinating about the way the students point to pieces of card. So they're almost going, here's a unistructural piece of information that I need to kind of get. And as they point to more of them, you're kind of thinking, okay, well, I've got some multi-structural understanding happening here. And then what you'll see, and I'll just bring my hands up to the camera, you'll see this kind of movement where students actually physically with their hands start making connections and using from point to point to point. And at one point, it's hard to see, it's quite quick. You'll see people generalizing. And what happens eventually is as they start to generalize, is the cards get moved. You'll notice that most of the cards disappear, and they're then working at a kind of more extended level on the task itself. Now, what you don't know, everyone, is actually what the task was and what they were asked to do. And so what this task was filmed at John Monash Science School with two amazing maths educators, Kimberly Whitty and Diane Farrell. And this was the task that these year 11 math students were given. So I love mathematics. I must say it is probably one of the most fascinating areas. If I was given this task, though, I'm telling you right now, I am pre-structural.
I'm pretty scared about looking at this.
I don't know where to start. I've got graph, so I've suddenly got a unistructural. But beyond that, I'm like, okay, this is challenging. But those students obviously had some experience of this context, had been looking at graphing. And so they were given, what does the graph of fx look like? And then they were given all of this information cut up on pieces of card. If you are a maths teacher and you want to do this with your kids, please do. I've checked with Kimberly and Diane. They're very happy to share this material with anyone who wants to use it. But what importantly Kimberly and Diane did as well was not only did they create this activity, this brains on the table activity, but they also created this kind of, it's the start of a growth ladder. And we haven't talked about growth ladders yet, but we're going to get to that. But really it was saying, what can the students do? What do we expect to see when they're working at the different levels? So at a relational, multi-structural, I'll just bring them all up, a unistructural and pre-structural. Maybe if we start at the bottom, the students were very much, when they were given this activity, in a pre-structural stage. They didn't know what to do. They hadn't been given this kind of kinesthetic brains on the table activity before. So they start pre-structurally, but soon they look for information and they're like, okay, I can spot something here. I know what a turning point is. I know what a parabola is. I'm starting to get my kind of unistructural and multi-structural understanding happening. So you'll see that physically as the cards become grouped. And then when I can actually understand that, okay, so this piece of information about a turning point here must link to this kind of coordinate bit here. And you'll see the students making these physical links. And then as they actually move into that extended abstract, they've got this concept, right? They've got this concept of graphing. They've got all of the information, and they're actually able to move the cards out of the way to an extent. So you'll see the move. You'll also see them move some things back in. That was that piece that we were talking about of the movement between multi-structural, relational, and extended abstract. You kind of sometimes move in and out of these spaces. And the only thing about speeding up the video, which we had to do because otherwise 25 minutes is a long time to watch, is we lose the audio. But not that I could necessarily interpret the audio myself, but Diane and Kim were so able to hear, just by listening into groups, hear the kind of talk that was happening, the kind of dialogue between the students, discussing the data and making generalizations about the graph. So they were able to use that activity and to go around and watch different groups and listen to different groups and see what they were doing to really kind of start to understand, can these students move into that relational and indeed extended abstract area around graphing reasonably quickly. So what we're going to do is just to kind of wrap this a little bit up here, we're actually going to watch that video again. And I'm going to talk to you a little bit, and I'm going to ask you to kind of put your solo hat on, or maybe your solo glasses as a lens, and watch what's happening and see if you can spot some of those solo pieces. So we'll just quickly watch this video again. So as you can see, they've been given the cards. They're kind of already going, right, let's do some sorting here because we don't really know what's going on. We've got some information. Here we go. Okay, we're pointing the stuff we know. We're starting to group. So maybe starting to get multi-structural here. And this is the bit I want you to look at. They've now got this into some organization and some relationships, but watch the pointing and the moving. There's a really interesting bit here where this is no longer relevant information. This is really important. Let's bring this out, bring it back in. They're discussing, they're talking, they've really focused in. Tom, is there anything else you're noticing?
They're recording, aren't they? They're capturing stuff. So that's obviously setting it down that must be more accurate than others.
It's interesting to see that some things come in and some things come out. And now they're almost not referring to the cards at all. So they're in that kind of extended, generalized frame.
Yeah. And so, you know, for the teachers that you were working with here, they already had this solar taxonomy and sort of the ideas of what they might look for in terms of a signal already planned and designed, hadn't they?
Yeah, absolutely. And this was part of our work around solar taxonomy. We designed this as we thought it would be a really good proxy. And indeed, it turned out to be. And one of the things you'll know, and we're going to get into that in the next lesson really, really quite quickly, is that where the kind of solo almost rubric was written was in the first person. Because actually what happened was they did this activity. They gave that rubric to students so that students could read it. So it says, I can do these things. Actually kind of helping them and supporting them about, okay, well, if you were stuck in this multistructural or almost unistructural level, none of them were stuck at the unistructural level, but that you had something that you could look at to help you kind of grow and move on. Yeah. So designing these proxies is so important, but also structuring them, as you say, Tom, so that there's something there that helps you to use Solo to identify the kind of things you might see through your proxy as something that we call a growth ladder. And that's something that we're going to look at in the next lesson.